Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Women Ascension. I am Jannat Ahmed. I'm the AWHR head, and today I have the profound honor of guiding us through what may be one of the most transformative conversations of our professional lives. Now imagine walking into a room where someone's entire world has been shattered, their trust broken, their sense of safety destroyed. In that moment, every word you speak, every gesture you make, every policy you implement can either begin that journey of healing or deepen the wound. And this is the reality faced by millions of gender-based violence survivors worldwide. And it's the reality that every professional, whether you're in healthcare, social work, law enforcement, education, or advocacy, must be prepared to navigate with wisdom, compassion, and expertise. Today, we are not just learning about trauma informed approaches. We are going to discover how to become architects of healing in a world that often re traumatizes those who need the support the most. And over the next hour, we'll explore the core principles that transform our response to gender based violence survivors. We'll understand how trauma shapes behavior, why interdisciplinary collaboration isn't just helpful but essential, and how to overcome the barriers that keep trauma informed care from reaching those who need it the most. And what makes today extraordinary is that we're not learning from textbooks or theories alone. We are learning from someone who has walked through the darkness and emerged not just as a survivor, but as a beacon of hope and change. Miss Petrina Monrose joins us today carrying a story that could have been defined as her as a victim forever. Instead, she chose to transform her life experience of surviving sex trafficking into a powerful force for justice and healing. For 6 years, she's worked within criminal justice system, mentoring high-risk individuals and proving that those who have experienced the depth of trauma can become the most effective healers. As a member of our Women Ascension Advisory Board, an expert on UN's Modern Slavery and Human Rights Policy Center, and a UN Women UK participant, Ms. Petrina doesn't just advocate for change, she architects it. Her mission to become a forensic psychologist while championing social justice reform represents the very essence of trauma informed leadership. What makes, Miss Petrina's voice so vital today is that she understands trauma not just as a concept to be studied, but as a lived reality to be transformed. She knows that behind every policy, every intervention, every moment of professional response, there's a human being whose healing journey depends on our ability to see their strength and not just their wounds. So today, Ms. Petrina will challenge us to move beyond sympathy to true understanding, beyond good intentions to effective action, and beyond individual responses to systematic change. So, whether you're a seasoned professional or just beginning your journey in supporting gender based violence survivors, prepare to have your perspective shifted, your toolkit expanded, and your commitment to trauma informed care deepened. Just a quick reminder, as always, we will open the floor for a Q&A segment and feedback towards the end of the session. So feel free to take down your notes and prepare your questions as we go along. So today, let's create a space where healing begins, not despite trauma, but because we finally understand how to honor it. So everyone, please join me in warmly welcoming Miss Petrina. Miss Petrina, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful welcome and beautiful introduction, and so articulately put. Thank you. Hello, everybody. How are you? Welcome to Women Ascension, and welcome to my webinar today is about an introduction, and it's about adopting a trauma-informed approach and a trauma-informed methods to inform all professionals in all fields of disciplines working with gender-based violence. Now, before I start, I just wanted to say to do this work, the responsibility of meeting the needs of people you are trying to help can at times be very overwhelming. So please take steps to monitor your own mental health in this webinar. I will be discussing self-care strategies and how they're vital tools for maintaining emotional stability and building resilience. When facing challenging emotional states such as anger, shame, or distress. Now, these methods that I'm teaching today can prevent the escalation of reactive behaviors. So, examples of effective care include engaging in all kinds of methods that we're going to be discussing, but also your own self as well. So, I'm going to get started. So I wanted to briefly introduce you to the fact that you know that I'm a survivor. I was sex trafficked as a minor, and I was trafficked into prostitution, where I spent 15 years of my life. It was a very arduous journey of reclaiming any sense of self. Um, Being so young and then going on to re-educate myself was very, very challenging. Survivor leaders possess extensive lived experience, awareness, and insight into traffickers, and in this case, perpetrators of gender-based violence, of their methods, of their activities, combined with a unique, unparalleled understanding of the specific needs of victims and survivors, as well as the risks survivors and victims face. Now, recognizing, and I'm not going to draw too heavily today on statistics because we have an awful lot to cover, but recognizing this urgent reality as documented by the World Health Organization really underscores the critical need for awareness and action. Now, traumatic events such as sexual violence or rape can trigger a range of psychological responses, including hyperarousal, anxiety disorders, depressive episodes and feelings of guilt, and CPTSD, chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as post-traumatic stress disorder. But psychologically and physiologically, they can also cause neurobiological changes. We are going to discuss that very briefly today, such as the modification in brain structure and biochemical processes. And additionally, as always, we take into consideration the sociological repercussions, which is the huge, pervasive, and endemic stigmatization. So, trauma. I'd like to give you some definitions of trauma. So, trauma is commonly conceptualized as an individual's subjective experience of a distressing event or a series of events that can lead to long-lasting adverse effects on the sense of safety, self-identity, interpersonal relationships, and overall functioning, which often results from traumatic stress. Now, research indicates that women are disproportionately affected by sexual violence and interpersonal trauma, which contribute to the high prevalence of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, chronic post-traumatic stress disorder typically develops following prolonged or recurrent exposure to traumatic events, with particularly high incidence observed among survivors of domestic violence. Now, globally, the prevalence of chronic post-traumatic stress disorder is approximately 6.2%, although it can reach up to 40% with trauma-exposed populations. The highest is I think it's 47 or 44%, and that's in the military population. But today, for this point, it's with domestic violence and sexual abuse survivors. Now, clients often present with complex and intricate psychological profiles where underlying complexity may pose significant challenges. Individuals with histories of recurrent early life trauma and repeated sexual violence in adulthood frequently exhibit a range of psychiatric comorbidities. Now, very often, clients may present with post-traumatic stress and chronic stress. I do reiterate this quite a lot, and I just wanted to give you a list of some of the psychiatric comorbidities of chronic trauma. So we have substance misuse, we have depression, we have post-traumatic stress disorder, we can have brief psychosis, we can have borderline personality disorder, we can have dissociative disorders, we can have eating disorders, and we can have somatization disorders. So, experiencing multiple traumatic events is known as complex trauma. And recognizing and addressing this trauma is crucial to prevent long-term harm, support recovery, and adopt a trauma-informed approach. Now, individuals who experience trauma or repeated trauma early in life and later in life may exhibit any of these symptoms. It's also common for these individuals to show post-traumatic conditions, as discussed. They may suffer from depression and similar issues. Now, repeated exposure to trauma often results in severe emotional dysregulation. Now, the different psychological disorders have specific functions, but I'd like to draw to your attention just one so we can look at substance use disorder. I'd like you to see that it could be because it's used as a coping mechanism in response to overwhelming circumstances. Therefore, understanding the why for substance use is essential as it helps to reduce stigmatizing attitudes towards these behaviors and prevents us from labeling people. Now, we can discuss that further if you want in the questions and answers, but I want to go on to why and how we address these issues in a trauma-informed approach. So I wanted to talk something about disassociation. It's a result of trauma. It's very important, and it is a temporary, often reoccurring detachment of a person's mind from their emotional state and body, which can manifest in various ways. For example, a person may stare into space for seconds, minutes, or even hours, or they fail to respond to environmental cues or behave as if they are re-experiencing traumatic events from their past. And disassociation stems from the automatic biological reaction that can occur during traumatic events when a person is unable to escape from danger. So this is like a psychological escape when there is no physical escape possible. And once they are out of danger, disassociation can be triggered by their memories or parts of their memories which are associated with the trauma. And sometimes they may not be aware of the trigger. And that's really important. And we'll go on to discuss that further, but hold that thought. So these are definitions of trauma. So you're trauma informed. So this is from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and it involves exposure to actual or potential situations such as death, severe injury, or sexual violation in this case. And this exposure can occur through directly experiencing traumatic events, witnessing them firsthand, learning about trauma experienced by family or friends, so vicarious, psychologically vicariously being traumatized, or repeatedly being exposed to distressing details of traumatic events. Now, I particularly really like this quote. It's my favorite quote because I think it encapsulates a survivor and a victim. Trauma is not what happens to you, it is what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. And this is Gabor Mate. And he states it's not the event itself, but the wound it leaves inside. The disconnection from the self and the others that results from overwhelming stress or emotional pain. Now, principles of trauma-informed interviewing. So, one and first and foremost always is safety. We have to provide an environment that guarantees both physical and psychological safety. Trust, or building a rapport, or the therapeutic alliance. We have to always maintain with all of the people that we work with, as it is the most important thing is to be reliable, is to be predictable, to have clarity, and to have consistency. And by clarity, I mean we have to be clear, we have to be coherent, we have to make sure we don't use language that is complicated or terminology that may that the people that we're working with who are entrusted into our care may not understand. And the reason for all of this is because of choice and empowerment. So We're trying to support the autonomy and the control of survivors and victims during the interview process. And that is a collaborative effort. So, traumatized individuals frequently exhibit a disconnection from both their internal sense of self and their external environment. Now, such a disconnection often presents as disruptions in spatial awareness, which can impair the capacity to engage in any kind of goal-orientated behavior or really try and reclaim any sense of agency. So, effective interventions necessitate a trauma-informed approach that prioritizes the development of what really is trying to be encapsulated here of a strong therapeutic alliance, because it restores a sense of agency, it upholds dignity and respect, and it promotes empowerment, thereby enabling individuals to make autonomous choices and regain control over their lives. Now, what does that look like? Well, it can be something that is as simple as how you greet somebody, making sure the room is really comfortable, that everything is there, asking the person what they'd like to drink, consistently involving that person all the time in a dialogue of collaboration, um, clearly outlining all of the objectives that are being set forth, always so just treating the person with this utter respect. You come into this space, it's a sacred space. You preempt all preconceived notions go, stereotypes, anything that you may have formulated before in your life from what you've read, what you've seen or watched goes. You create a space where we're two sentient beings. We come into this space as equals. We preempt all our own selves. We come in and we sit and we're impartial, non-judgmental. And in that space, through cultivating a space of kindness, respecting the dignity, the self-right, the self-determining right to be self-determined, respecting the human rights of the person is so important, and also being very respectful of cultural and gender issues, and also practicing cultural humility and addressing issues related to gender. Now, trauma-informed interview methodologies are based on the understanding of and responsiveness to the effects of trauma that consider the complex and multifaceted ways in which trauma presents itself in a person entrusted into our care. I hope that makes sense. Right. So as we move on within the scope of this webinar and supported by the literature, it can be best to assume that any individual seeking our services will be a trauma survivor. Now, using a trauma-informed approach, we stress the need for a safe environment that prioritizes the physical, emotional, and psychological well-being for both practitioners and survivors. Now, survivors are often, or victims are often required to provide a complete and accurate account of their history, their testimony, promptly after being identified by authorities. And this is because giving testimony is usually crucial for survivors to access their legal rights and support which are essential for their safety and well-being. However, this process presents many challenges, and it's critical to recognize that survivors or victims may be dealing with factors that affect their memory. So there is a biological basis of triggering it's called the neurobiology of trauma. So let's explore the impact of trauma on the brain. Memories of traumatic events differ from those of non-traumatic events because during traumatic experiences, the brain enters survival mode, and this response can specifically influence certain memory functions. Now, I would say, a good 10 years of my life, more, decades of my life in a very highly emotionally dysregulated place. And I had literally no control. It was such an emotional outpouring, and very often I was unable to articulate myself. I couldn't recall memories. It was a really traumatic time trying to reclaim any sense of agency outside of the domain of sexual servitude. And the hardest part for working with people that have experienced such severe traumatic events in their lives, like gender-based violence, is that they really have to have so much support and empowering them to believe that change is possible. And the work that you do is such a commitment to that person that it's really not taking over and enabling. So by that I mean you're bureaucratic and you tick boxes so you can say that you've adhered to all the objectives that are being set forth of how you're going to help and rehabilitate the young person or person that you're working with. Um, it's really about the respect and working together, and also the language that you use is so important. And this is where we come. Please do not panic when you see this. It's a very, very basic description, but it's so important. So when we look here, we're going to look at this lower one here. So what this diagram is conveying in the context of just what I said, if you can just hold that. So suppose the environment is unsafe, and we look down here. And this is the reptilian brain, and the reptilian brain is this gray part here, which includes the brainstem and the cerebellum, which is the most primitive part, and it's responsible for vital life functions and survival functions, such as actions such as fight and flight, freeze, orientation, and autonomic regulation. Now, when faced with constant threats, the body and the brain enter into a survival mode. And in that state, the lower part of the brain, the reptilian brain, becomes dominant. And this region does not think, it reacts reflexively to protect and ensure survival against threats. Now, in extreme situations with increasing danger, the body immobilizes, freezes, and shuts down, and the person may be in a state of either hyperarousal, so fight or flight, or hypoarousal, which is shut down and disassociation. Now, thinking and our higher cortical processes, and what I mean by that is I mean our higher functioning brain. So if we look up here, we have embodiment, we have thinking, planning, connection, curiosity, emotional regulation, our sense of agency. These, when we are not in a very heightened state of trauma, normally function very well, but in a traumatized individual, this is not the case. So common indicators would include, so thinking and higher cortical processing, a lot of cortisol is released in this, and reactions are reflexive and emotionally driven rather than reflective. So that may be that when you're working with somebody, they may become incredibly emotionally dysregulated. They may make no sense. Their stories may be very inconsistent. They may be aggressive. They may get very emotional, or they may be the opposite. They may not say anything. They may appear very disinterested. They may not want to speak. They may just stare, or they may be very anxious, or if there's other factors, not all the time. I don't want you to think that everybody that has experienced gender-based violence is going to be symptomatic of one of the disorders, the comorbidities that we talked about. That's not the case. We're not stigmatizing or discriminating against people. We're looking at the correlation that in some cases, not all cases, people do just have severe psychological impairments as a result of prolonged trauma. So as the person feels overwhelmed, the involuntary response of freeze and immobilization takes place. And this is the state, if you go back to when you take these slides, where disassociation occurs. Now, on the safe side, the nervous system can stay within or return to a zone where emotions are regulated and cognitive processes are then available. And the brain's higher networks, which you can see here, including the prefrontal cortex, can engage, allowing flexible thinking, memory integration, planning, and controlled action. You may notice that the person's breathing, slower heart rate, more coherent thinking, rational, and the ability to reflect on what is happening. Now, parts of the brain are essential for forming memories. So when when the amygdala detects a threat, it affects the hippocampus in two main ways. Initially, after recognizing danger, it switches to a super encoding mode, like creating a detailed memory of the event of early moments. And soon after, it transitions to a minimally encoding mode, which may lead to incomplete or fragmented memories of sexual violence, emphasizing sensory details. And additionally, these memories lack a narrative and they lack. So somebody may say to you, they could only remember the smell, they could only remember the perpetrator's face, they could only remember where they were, or they can't remember how they actually got there. There's so many inconsistencies and breakdown. It's a fragmentation of the self. And why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because lots of reasons, and I hope you're all still with me. One, when we have people that come into our care, entrusted into our care, that are highly traumatized, we have to really look at the language that we use, and we have to pace everything. So we have to use reassuring, non-shaming language that normalizes these fluctuations. It's actually orientating that person back to a safe space. Um, and you can do that with language that can actually calm the whole sympathetic and parasympathetic system down. And so the therapeutic aim is to help the person stay within this window here that we're talking about as a baseline, and then expand that. So basically, this is the window of tolerance. I absolutely love this. I would really like you to pay really close attention to this, because this is exactly what we are trying to do in trauma-informed interviews, trauma-informed methods. But this is exactly where the survivor or the victim is. So the window of tolerance is which a person can perceive, process, and integrate emotional experiences effectively. Now, within this window, so here is the optimal arousal zone. Within this, you can think clearly, you can feel and regulate emotions, and you can respond adaptively to stress. Now, hyperarousal of the above window includes heightened activation. This is where fight or flight responses, anxiety, hypervigilance, rapid breathing, racing thoughts, dilated pupils. This is where somebody can feel very overwhelmed, anger, panic, and or in this one, hypoarousal. So this includes reduced activation, characterized by a numbing, a dissociation, withdrawal, detachment, as well as slow thinking and emotional blandness. Sometimes you may just find somebody is just speaking on one monotone. And this is vital to pay attention to, because what we are actually trying to do with the tone and pace of our voices, as well as our verbal expressions and our non-verbal cues, such as our physical gestures, any form of professional communication with a survivor of gender-based violence should be viewed as an opportunity to assist them in progressing towards long-term safety, stability, and well-being. So the trauma-informed code of conduct is about this window here, which is so narrow in survivors of victims of gender-based violence. There's either this hyperarousal or there's this hypoarousal, and this optimum arousal zone often is very narrow. And what we're trying to do through the facilitation of trauma in care and trauma-informed methods, and we're trying to open up this optimal arousal zone, which means that we can communicate once the person feels safe with us through building a rapport and a therapeutic alliance. We can then start to explore of how we can both work together and collaborate and assist. So any meeting space always has to feel as safe as possible. And this helps build trust and confidence gradually over time, allowing to express and allow victims to express themselves more freely. So um, I hope that makes sense. Now, okay, how do we work with this window of tolerance? How do we help somebody to orientate them back to a safe place? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to look at power dynamics. Now, we have to remain vigilant to avoid unintentionally recreating the victor-perpetrator dynamic that survivors may have experienced during incidents of sexual violence. Now, you may think, what is she saying? Um, I'll just before I go on. So these power disparities exist, and one of the reasons why I want to work as mainly as an advocate now, I'm going on to work with psychology. I'm working with trauma as a psychologist, um, is because when I was working within the criminal justice system, something I noticed with very well-intentioned people, lovely people, it was inadvertent. There was nothing they were trying to do intentionally to harm others. But because these power disparities play out, what happens is survivors are hyper vigilant. As we talked about in this window of tolerance, and we looked at the biology of the brain function, the neurobiology of brain function, we have a highly agitated nervous system. We're incredibly instinctive because we've had to be to survive. So every instinct is alive. And what happens is that we have people with the best intentions that come in and they may say, well, I think you should do this, or I think you should do that, or maybe that actually isn't what I meant, but they kind of take over and they sort of assert their positions of authority. Now, that dynamic of where you feel again quite powerlessness and helplessness, and you can't find your voice, when you feel the dynamic of an authoritarian dynamic or anything that questions your credibility, that questions you as an individual, whether you are to be believed, it can mimic this victim perpetrator dynamic. Now, it's essential to adopt an empowering approach by building rapport and a therapeutic alliance, thereby enhancing the victim survivor's sense of agency and dignity, demonstrating what we call investigative empathy, and offering informed choices. Additionally, providing clear and coherent information along with details of subsequent procedures is crucial to upholding high ethical and professional standards and facilitating a trauma-informed approach. So it's important to recognize the ongoing risk of harm or retaliation as well from perpetrators towards survivors and their families. Additionally, professionals working directly with victims must consider risks related to physical and mental health, safeguarding, legal issues, and all the other sort of like the welfare and the current relationships of the survivor and the victim. Debriefing is very important. So yeah, we can talk about that. Actually, that's a whole other topic in of itself. So, why is it so important to avoid traumatization? When it involves observing the emotional states of victims and survivors and provides targeted support upon identifying signs indicating psychological distress, such as we talked about hyperarousal responses, hypoarousal responses, or the reoccurrence of trauma through flashbacks. Now, recommended intervention strategies include offering reassurance with statements like, you are safe. So, what we talked about, orientating that person back to a safe space and giving that person, you are in control, and re-establishing rapport through affirmations such I am here, or if you're in a group, we are here with you. And trauma-informed interviewing techniques also recommend assessing the survivor's current experience by asking about their focus and emotional state. For example, what is happening for you at this moment? Additionally, it emphasizes the importance of regular check-ins to monitor well-being with questions such as, is this helpful? And how are you feeling right now? Would you like me to stop? Consistently handing back control, handing back empowering, letting that person feel that actually this is a collaborative effort, that we're working together, you know. So, for episodes of flashbacks and hyperarousal, the use of reorientation techniques, which I talked about, including grounding exercises, mindfulness to foster present moment awareness, and breathing techniques. And overall, these approaches aim to facilitate emotional regulation and they establish a sense of safety during interview procedures, thereby enhancing the support offered to trauma and survivors. I particularly like journaling. Um, because I find that journaling is something that really helps me, and it's there's a lot of research to show that journaling is really helpful for trauma, working with trauma, and also for survivors and also for victims. Now, key considerations for professionals in trauma-informed questioning. So, memory fragmentation. Survivors' memories of sexual violence are often fragmented, with some details vividly recalled while others are lost or inaccessible. Emotional and cognitive impact. Survivors or victims may feel guilt or shame about their responses during the incident, especially if they have exhibited a freeze or collapse response that hindered resistance, or if they engaged in reflex behaviors they now see as inconsistent with victimization. Sensory memories without context. Survivors or victims may retain sensory impressions such as odors without understanding their context, for example, recalling the smell of alcohol without recognizing it as the perpetrator's breath. That can re-trigger a survivor, or easily a smell, a sound, even a person's the way a person can react with you, everything. So survivors tend to remember central details, elements of most threatening or frightening from their perspective, more clearly than the peripheral details. So central details often relate to perceived threats such as the perpetrator's facial expression, whereas peripheral information, time, day, may be less salient, which is a problem for testimonies. And it could be an explanation of why attrition rates are just so low. Because, unless we have a trauma-informed approach, unless we know how to work with individuals, unless we know how to safeguard and reorientate people back to a safe space, then we get very fragmented testimonies. Now, this is an example of some questions which I wanted to share with you, of not questions to avoid and trauma-informed reframing. So the formulations here that you can see of questioning during interviews with survivors of sexual violence may be approached with very careful consideration, as it significantly impacts the quality and the content of the information collected. The wording and inquiries can influence survivors' recall, their perception and emotional responses to the interview process. So effective questioning framing should facilitate the retrieval of salient details while concurrently minimizing risks of traumatization and re-victimization. You can see, instead of saying, tell me what happened, a trauma-informed would you tell me what you can about your experience? Instead of saying start at the beginning, we could say, where would you like to start? What happened next? What else do you remember? Instead of asking, describe the location they took you to, you could say, what can you remember about where they took you? So this SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, they published the concept of trauma and guidance for a trauma-informed approach. It's the most commonly used, and it's based on 4 key assumptions known as the 4 R's. We kind of discussing them all the time as we go along, but one is realizes a trauma-informed approach recognizes the widespread impact of trauma, the pervasive endemic widespread effects of trauma, and explores ways to support recovery. It recognizes the signs and symptoms of traumas in individuals. It responds by incorporating trauma-informed principles into professional practice through policies, procedures, and practices that promote trust, dignity, respect, and hope. And this approach aims to address power imbalances, as we discussed, and with the main objective of always gathering reliable information to facilitate the right support and legal support. and resists re-traumatization and re-victimization of survivors, as well as secondary and vicarious trauma experienced by first responders or professionals, interviewers, or health professionals. Now, reducing burnout and vicarious trauma and trauma-informed services. Now, key components of trauma-informed practice aimed at alleviating burnout and vicarious trauma include recognizing and normalizing the emotional responses linked to engaging with survivors of gender-based violence. So what do we mean by that? So in order for us to not become traumatized ourselves, and with it's called vicarious trauma or burning out, one sign we may start to recognize is when we start normalizing the responses of survivors and victims. And if you find that you're becoming desensitized or dehumanized to the suffering of another, that doesn't mean to say it's what we talked about before. It's an investigative empathy. When we are becoming disassociated, yeah, we need to see that maybe we're becoming vicariously traumatized. We need providing targeted training or providing this approach that we're talking about today of a trauma-informed approach and the adjacent methodologies. We're we're improving understanding of the stress mechanisms and we're identifying risk factors for vicarious trauma, such as histories of personal trauma, high workload, boundary neglect, over extension of maybe you're just taking on too much responsibility, limited clinical experience, long-term employment. So maybe you've been at this work for a very long time, or you're working with clients who have dissociative disorders or trauma affected children. Now, it's absolutely vital to ensure that you have access to clinical supervision. We do need to foster a culture of to be reflexive in our practice to build resilience. So reflective practice is very important. So clinical supervision, journaling, is a very good way of having a form of reflective practice. Adopting organizational policies and activists that promote self-care strategies, including frameworks like the ABC model of self-care. It's important to recognize that recurring factors contributing to vicarious trauma include excessive workload. And as we discussed, how can you prevent that? Well, I didn't have enough time today to talk about everything, but you can prevent that by having very good high standards of self-care. You cannot do this work if you do not look after yourself. You are called to a very high calling. You have a huge responsibility for the people that are entrusted into your care. You have to make sure that you look after yourself. That means that you have to take time out for physical exercise, diet, sleep is so important. Um, you know, just making sure that you look after yourself. Discipline, being very disciplined. I'm very disciplined. I live my life in a way that everything I do through being so conscientious. This happens a lot with survivors, is that because I know how difficult this is and how challenging this is for the survivor of gender-based violence, because I know that sense of helplessness and powerlessness. I know how it feels to feel in an environment where, I'm just being labeled, or, I'm perceived as being crazy, or I have a multitude of labels and symptoms attached to me when actually I'm just deeply suffering and I don't know how to articulate or communicate with myself. We have to be we're ambassadors, we are architects of of this care. It's such an important role. It's cannot be overemphasized. If you are going to have bad lifestyle habits, then I don't think, and this is me, not any form of condemnation, it's certainly the most uttermost care. I don't think that you should do this work. This work calls you to be, that means you don't ever not have a good time. You have an amazing time, but it means that, you really do have to be in a really safe space yourself. And I take it so seriously. I make sure that I sleep, I eat, I don't have no vices. There's nothing that clouds my judgment. I just take it the responsibility of caring and rehabilitating people, because you've got a person that's trying to change their life, and that's possible with your care. You can make huge amounts of change with the most simplest things. It's incremental. It doesn't have to be all of this information is overwhelming. Just by treating somebody with the respect and dignity, and just having a belief that that person has the ability to change is very, very empowering. Um, so pathways, I wanted to just to reiterate on this. So pathways to specialized trauma treatment or trauma-specific support. So I'm not a specialist in trauma. I have an in-depth knowledge from my own lived experiences, and I've got my qualifications, but I'm not a trauma specialist that offers psychological interventions for trauma. So I always suggest when we take this approach that we have pathways to specialized trauma treatment. So all services supporting victims and survivors of gender-based violence should adopt a trauma-informed approach, but we have to have the option to access trauma-specific specialist services if the survivor or the victim agrees, they consent. So survivors need to be guided and supported in accessing these treatments, but not coerced. It has to be consensual. And we need to have strong links with relevant organizations that help to facilitate referrals, because many survivors find it very challenging to access trauma-specific support. So clear pathways are essential, and survivors find it difficult to trust, and survivors a disclosure can increase trust and help facilitate a strong therapeutic relationship. And it asks of professionals to respond adequately to the disclosures of survivors and victims. So please be advised that the material in question, sometimes that you're listening to, is highly stigmatized, and the extent to which a survivor is willing to disclose such information may vary depending on their perceived levels of shame and vulnerability associated with disclosing. We also have breach of confidentiality. We have to make very clear that if there's anything that a survivor or a victim is going to say that's going to harm themselves or harm others, then we have to disclose that to the relevant authorities. And that's very difficult. That is an area I would just love to talk to you about, just one, webinar on that, because that is a very, but we haven't got time. It's a very, very interesting perspective I have on that from my own lived experience. So, vicarious trauma involves negative changes that develop over time as we engage with others. Trauma and suffering, it's more likely to affect us when we feel deeply empathic and committed to those we assist, especially if we are regularly discuss or hear about trauma details as part of our work. Signs in our own personal life, if we're experiencing vicarious trauma, difficulty managing emotions, challenges accepting or feeling okay about yourself, trouble making sound decisions, problems maintaining boundaries between yourself and others, such as taking on too much responsibility or struggling to leave work at the end of the day. This can come into your interpersonal relationships, physical issues. We can have difficulty feeling connected to your surroundings or your own inner self, and we can have a sense of loss of meaning and hope. So it's really important to take care of yourself. It really, really is. And to really have a good clinical supervisor that you can go and disclose all of this information and debrief all your meetings with survivors and victims. Do very, very in-depth debriefs. You don't have to disclose everything, but you can disclose key salient points. So if a survivor near you becomes distressed and disassociates or re-experiences trauma, it's helpful to redirect their attention to the present moment. And we have discussed this, and I know this is going back and forward a little bit, but I just wanted to I know this may seem a bit incoherent, but I just wanted to keep reiterating it in different ways, because this is actually what trauma-informed care is. It's not it's about a technique, but it's actually more about you cultivating the right kind of empathy that doesn't enable, it empowers, and it creates more autonomy and sense of agency in the person that we're trying to help. But when somebody becomes incredibly distressed and dissociated, it's very helpful to bring them back to the present moment. And we've discussed that about how we can do that by focusing and by discussing, we've talked about grounding techniques, we've talked about how movement can help calm distress. We can halt disassociative episodes and redirect the focus, and some individuals may prefer a moment alone. However, when someone is disorientated or confused, it's essential to remain close, as leaving them alone is not advisable. And there's something that's called creating the illusion of time, so which is a very, very important part of trauma-informed care. When we foster greater trust and confidence by communicating in a way that conveys a sense of taking the time, this means no rushed movements, no quick gestures, no avoiding eye contact, or any behavior that suggests haste can increase existing anxiety. I wanted to leave you with some of the challenges before we leave for yourselves, just to become aware of. And I will be covering this in more depth in future webinars, is rape myths and how these are stereotypical and false beliefs that serve to shift blame onto the victim. So, according to the Rape Crisis England and Wales in 2019, these myths represent a powerful and dangerous societal tool, contributing to victims' feeling of shame regarding their assault and concerns about societal perception. I would encourage everybody to preempt all stereotypical notions that they have of the people that are entrusted into their care, and take a look at some of the rape myth biases and become informed about what constitutes rape, and specifically around consent. Now, these attitudes prevent us from recognizing victims and have also infiltrated into the criminal justice system. A lot of my research and my master's was on this, and I'm actually trying to get it published at the moment. And it influences decision-making processes and partly accounts for the low attrition rates in sexual violence. And according to the 2024 Roundtable with migrant survivors of domestic abuse conducted by the Office of the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, research has shown that more than half, 54% of migrant women fear the police will not believe them due to their immigration status. So that's a case of victim blame. So you'll find that people have these preconceived, stereotypical, prejudicial beliefs. They will see the person just completely and utterly in a form of discriminatory, and it's our role to be able to, this is why a trauma-informed approach and this professional code of conduct, adhering to very high ethical stance, is that we are trying to find the truth. We're trying to help and facilitate and support and rehabilitate in whatever field of profession that you're in. It's so important, because you can take this is a great tool, by the way, that I wanted to leave you with, because I'm nearly finished. And this is you can take personal action to minimize your risk of vicarious trauma. And there's a website there. It's a free online tool that's designed to enhance self-care and overall well-being among healthcare professionals, or for people like myself, survivors, victims, by explaining key concepts related to occupational health and resilience. And it's developed by Dr. Beth Hudnall-Stamm, and it's an NGO. And it considers how to adapt your activities to avoid situations that might lead to vicarious trauma. And it's really, really, really good. I really recommend it. And you may also lastly develop trauma symptoms yourself. So as we talked about, hyperarousal, including nightmares, difficulty concentrating, being easily startled, sleep disturbances. There's a list there. So again, I really do emphasize self-care. I talked about the a framework for self-care, the ABC model that's frequently used, which is awareness. So we cultivate an understanding of early warning signs related to physical emotion and our own psychological well-being, and we adjust professional and personal strategies accordingly. And we can engage in self-monitoring and self-compassion practices to recognize our individual needs, recognizing our limitations, our emotions, our only our available sources. They really do let us know how we're feeling. And we can assess the emotional, psychological, and physical impacts of the work-related stressors. And balance. We have to strive to maintain an optimal balance among work, leisure, and restorative activities. Practice unconditional self-compassion to cultivate resilience and overall well-being. And that is the end of my talk. It's a lot, and we definitely will have some questions and answers regarding it. And thank you so much. And I hope that all made sense.
Miss Petrina, I think I need to pause just for a moment before we open the questions, because what you've just shared with us goes far beyond a presentation. It's been a masterclass.
Really?
And yeah. And I'm saying that in we are very genuinely happy, and we're really grateful that you have, you've woven your experience together with, with your professional expertise, and that just not has educated us, but it has shown what a true leadership, looks
Oh,
like.
yeah,
And
that's kind of you. I'm very, very passionate about this. I really am. This is I think I've had so many years of an unlived life, and lost so many years of my life to a situation that I didn't choose for myself. And the decades I can't get back, but I can help so many people, and it's my sole mission to help people. I am passionate about rehabilitation. Somebody comes to me for care, then I am 100%. I'm all in. And there is, and I'm fully committed. So I really appreciate your lovely, kind words.
yeah, Miss Bettina, we want to thank you, for trusting us with your truth and showing us that healing isn't just possible, it's transformative. And there are a lot of participants who are really eager to engage with you further. So let's open this space for them, for their questions and reflections.
Write
Those who
them
want,
down.
yeah, a lot of them have dropped their questions in the chat box, and some of them want to interact with you
Of
directly.
course.
So
Yes.
anyone who wants to directly ask a question, yeah, there are two hands raised. One is, I think, Wahid. I can't see them.
Oh, yeah, that's Wahid.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, Wahid. Okay. Please go ahead. I'm really sorry for the wrong
It's okay.
pronunciation.
All right.
Okay.
May I go ahead?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Petrina, I want to say one thing to you. You're a servant leader. You know, I really love the servant leadership, and that's why I call you you're a servant leader, because the way you were explaining, all the participants felt, relaxed, calm, and somehow they felt that, yeah, we can avoid trauma. So thank you very much, Katrina. God bless you. Uh,
Thank you.
I hope you always have this energy because it's very good. In general, we have, four types of people. I'm saying, and also I'm sharing the things, what I'm saying in the chat box. We are four types of people. Process man, man here means woman and man. It talks about generally. Process man, people man, idea man, action man. So about survivors, at the very beginning, when we want to help a survivor, I'm talking about the slide number 7. When we want to help survivors, we at the very beginning we should know ourselves, who we are. Are we process man, people man, idea man, action man? Why? Because we are the survivor. We want to help the survivor. And one thing I should say that the survivors are always marginalized. They're always in the corner of the room. They don't want to come. We should go to them. So, and the next, when we talk to the survivors, we should understand they're nice. When we talk to
Yes.
the yes, when we talk to the survivors, we should understand they're nice. Nice means what are their needs? The survivor, the girl, the boy, what they really need, what is their interest, what is their concern, what is a concern, what is their expectation? Because when we understand these 4 things from the survivor, we can easily understand how to help that person or the survivor. When we understand the nice of the survivors, we should pistol and use the pistol analysis. Is it political? Is it economic? Is it social? Is it technological? Is it legal? Or is it environmental? We should scan. If their needs is based on political, we should and scan all these things.
Mm-hmm.
After that, there is a very nice, let's say model. I usually use this model when I want to help someone, a boy or a girl, or a man or a woman, reduce, avoid trauma. I usually use this technique because this is a very nice technique for me. First, I want to ensure that the safety of the person, remembrance, mourning, then reconnection. Why I am saying all these things? Because I come from a background of an NGO. I do I implement the projects. I manage the projects. I communicate with a lot of people who have trauma. Especially, I'm also from Afghanistan. Because in Afghanistan it happens a lot. So I just wanted to add these models. I strongly agree with the ways you said, but I'm pointing out not to the person who is survivor or who has trauma. I'm saying all these things to those who do not have trauma, but is still they are responsible. They are accountable to help them. The thing is, as I told already, the survivors, the people who have trauma, they don't come to you. We have to go to them. Like Patrina. Patrina does not have trauma. She came to us. I have trauma. She came to me. She wants to help me. So she uses different techniques, and now the impact of or the outcome or the takeaway of this session is we gather a lot of things, strategies in order to help our sisters, brothers to avoid trauma, stop trauma, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, can I thank you? Well, can I add something to what you were saying? Would you mind? Is that
Eh,
okay?
Sure.
Okay.
I would be
So,
really happy you add something. Yeah, thank you.
okay, well, firstly, thank you very much for sharing and for your insights and for the work that you do. I have 1 or 2 things I'm going to pick up from that. So one of them is that I would probably say we don't go to survivors or victims. I understand exactly what you were meaning, and I think you're wonderfully empathic and you're remarkable, but we don't go to survivors, we don't go to victims. They have to come to us. There is we have so for my own life, I still have a lot of trauma. You know, I see a trauma specialist every month. I will have trauma for the rest of my life. But I'm educated and I'm safe and I know how to rate that window of tolerance that we were talking about. I have a huge window of tolerance now, but I didn't. But I had to want to help myself. And it's actually has to come from the survivor. All the work that I do with mentoring and in the criminal justice system, with the objectives that are set forth by the three-way meeting that we do very often with the probation officer and all kinds of people. These, in this case, in the criminal justice system, the person has to consent. They have to want, they have to volunteer. None of this work will happen if the person doesn't want to cooperate. If they don't want to it's different because in the scenarios we're talking about where we have a survivor or a victim that's been entrusted into our care. So we have to be very, very careful and tread very carefully to know if the person is there because it's a prescription of this mandated by the courts, or they're doing it, you know, to be seen in a certain way and perceived in a certain way. So it's you have to really understand and feel that dynamic. But you're right in everything else you say. And if it's working for you and you're making an impact, then I commend you for the wonderful work that you're doing. Thank you. But just the yeah, we go to survivors is just something because that can be where the power disparities play out a little bit again. It's actually they all go. We're just there to help, and it's the gentleness and calmness that really helps someone sitting just in a safe space, very still, very quiet. We don't really need to know anything, only if it's given freely and it's given under the premise of trust, building upon a rapport and the therapeutic alliance that I'm talking about, adhering to a very high professional code of ethical conduct that's trauma informed. So we don't create more re-traumatization and secondary re-victimization, and we don't traumatize ourselves.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you don't
Why
mind
did
me
I say
saying
that?
that.
Sorry?
I hope you don't mind me saying that.
It's okay. In Afghanistan, I experienced that when a person has trauma, the person feels that there's no one who can help me. I should sit somewhere. This is the best way to cope with it. And that's why I mentioned that. Thank you for adding your insights and somehow adjusting that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for honestly, you're wonderful. Thank you. And
Thank you
I
very
hope
much. You're
thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
Miss Sarah, you want to go ahead and interact with Miss Petrina?
Yes, first of all, hi and warm greetings to everyone. I hope everyone is having a great time. I actually really loved tonight's I can say seminar or anything. It was really lovely. I enjoyed every bit of information I learned. And I have a small question. I'm an Afghan girl and I have been through a number of things. And they're not like really harsh, like being hostage or anything, but I have been through a lot of things. And actually, there were many that could traumatize me, but I have no reaction. Like I am in a scary situation. It is super stressful. It can be traumatizing, but after a while, but at that moment, like my feelings just shut down. I don't have any strong feeling. I forget to feel sad. I forget to feel happy. Anything. My mind just it is not like that I cannot function. My body functions pretty well. Everything is okay, just my feelings shut down. I don't feel sad anymore. When my feelings just get a little too much, they just shut down. Is that a problem?
No, thank you very, very much for sharing, and it's lovely to meet you. Not at all. No, not at all. You've experienced some traumatic events, and without disclosing, this is not the right place, but disassociation very often manifests as a protective response to overwhelming traumatic experiences. So you may feel emotionally numb, you may feel detached, but you're still functioning. That's what you're telling me, yes? You're still able to carry on with your life, but you're kind of in some way normalized it, which, by the way, is very normal. When we live a life where we have repeated trauma and we're exposed to trauma, we do become normalized, and we do have a sense of depersonalization or even derealization, and the struggles to form, and it's when it all stops. It's when it's actually stops. It's when you come out of an environment that is traumatizing. This is when the body starts to feel, and you start to see and perceive things differently. But I think if you've been exposed to chronic trauma, then I think dissociative symptoms such as what you're talking about can emerge as a subconscious way to cope with overwhelming threats and protect the self from unbearable pain. So yeah, I think you're doing remarkably well, and it's lovely to meet you. Does that answer your question?
I have a lot of questions. I have a ton of questions. I just recently, I can say, got introduced to psychology, and I actually love psychology, and I have a lot of questions that I know here is not a place to ask them. So, yeah, that could answer a lot of things. Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot for all your efforts. Thank you for having this meeting, and your efforts are respected. Thank you.
Oh, and so your thoughts are very respected too. And thank you for sharing, and thank you for being vulnerable. And I wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Miss Atya, would you like to go ahead?
Hello, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, but you can be a bit louder if it's possible.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Hello, can you hear me now? Is it okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Hello, Ma'am Katrina. How are you? Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is good and fine. Thank you so much for this great session. Honestly, it was really amazing being a psychologist, clinical psychologist from Afghanistan. I really loved the session, and I was really interested in this topic, and finally I got it. I had this one question in my mind from Katrina. The question is, being clinical psychologists, we take sessions with clients. We have different kind of clients with different disorders most of the time, such as depression and anxiety. So the basic question is, being a psychologist, we use and we utilize the skills that is taught to us, like to be empathetic with them, to understand them, to provide a safe environment to the clients, and to make the client safe, to make him understand that he or she is in a safe place. And we utilize those skills, and we have already like a kind of made our personality in this way so that they cannot feel um, unsafe with us. My question is, what is the key distinction in the trauma informed care, I can say, or a person from PTSD? Uh, for example, one client is from PTSD, is having PTSD, another is depression, major depression, or any anxiety disorder. And they both come to me. What will I do? What will be the difference in dealing? What will be the main thing that I understand to deal the client having PTSD, another with depression, because both of them are sensitive, both of them need extra care, the normal people. So how will I differentiate that this is trauma informed care and this is not? This is a normal psychotherapeutic session, and the tasks or the therapy that I am doing. What will be the difference between the two kind of therapies? I hope I made my point clear.
So I'll try and reiterate back to what you're saying to me because thank you very much for your question and thank you for the amazing work you're doing. And it sounds so you're trying to ask me, and I can't hear you very well. So let's make sure I'm very clear. Um, so you're a clinical psychologist?
Yes, I'm a clinical psychologist. Yeah,
Congratulations, that's amazing.
thank you.
And you're wanting to know when you're treating your clients
Yes,
for post-traumatic stress or in the case with or depression or anxiety, you want to know how you would know that you're
how would I know to
yeah.
deal differently? Like, what would be my specific skill or anything that will differentiate the two clients? So, that, like in dealing the clients, what will be my key responsibility with regards to the two clients?
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm with you. I've got you. Okay, key responsibility. Okay, so what you're saying, okay. Right. Well, I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I can answer it to what I've scribbled down here. So I would say what I was reiterating in the presentation is creating safety, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you do, fostering trustworthiness,
Uh-huh.
offering choice, ensuring collaboration, promoting empowerment to avoid re-traumatization and support the healing process. But these are guidelines for practitioners and organizations to recognize the pervasive impact of trauma. And I think by the sounds of it, that you do recognize the pervasive impact of trauma and you understand trauma, you understand the signs and the symptoms, and you integrate that into the knowledge. And I presume you would have that knowledge would be in your policy, your procedures, and in your practices. So
Yeah.
for me, key responsibilities, I would say, is recognize, as you do, the widespread impact of trauma on the individuals, identify the signs and symptoms of trauma, and take a bespoke approach. I mean, I'm trying to answer this to the best I can, so I apologize if I'm not.
No,
But
it's okay. I understand your.
individual differences.
Yeah.
So in the response, you sort of integrate the knowledge of the trauma into, because I would have thought you would have had to adhere to very stringent policies, procedures, and practices to create a safe environment as a clinical psychologist. So I think, yeah, I just think it's all about ensuring that it's meets the individual needs. I think I'm trying to understand it because, again, it's all the things that we talked about. It's just about just meeting the needs of the individual you're meeting in a trauma-informed way that is done to a high level of attention to detail and care, addressing the language that we use, how we position ourselves, the power imbalances. I don't know if that's helping or not. I'm a little bit confused as what you're asking me, truthfully, because you're an expert and I would have thought you're doing a fantastic job. So what is there a particular area that you're struggling with? Is there something that you when you're looking at the work that you're doing and you're differentiating between post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, for example, and two clients, do you feel there's areas of your own professional development that need to be looked at, or do you feel that you naturally are trauma informed, or do you feel there's areas that maybe you need to develop? And does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand now. Maybe like recently there was a client, so I will just say like this. And I understand that she is suffering from PTSD, and now I want to understand if I am doing it correct or not. Like I have listened to her, I have understand her, I referred her to a psychologist, to a consultant psychologist definitely. So this is my question: is that if there is some other things, like there is some other advanced therapies or something that could, help her more to grow and to make her at ease rather than other things that already we are doing.
Yep. Okay. So So, I personally, I like dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a combination of individual and group therapy and teaching skills and emotional. It's what I'm actually going to go on and probably do my PhD in. It's teaching emotional regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness. And ultimately, it works towards a more balanced and less rigid way of experiencing life and relationships and therefore trauma. So dialectical behavioral therapy sort of, I find that it helps to manage triggers, it reduces self-harm behaviors, and it breaks free from the destructive patterns by balancing acceptance of the current feelings or the radical acceptance of current feelings for change. So it's very, very, very good with borderline personality disorder, but it has two core approaches, which is acceptance, so which I find is very validating because it acknowledges the reactions and behaviors and how they make sense given the past trauma, especially in the context of gender-based violence, and change. And the therapist then you can work to teach new healthier ways to cope and behave. And with regards to PTSD, dialectical behavioral therapy looks at mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. It manages triggers and it reduces self-destructive behavior. And it also breaks free from rigid views. So if you're struggling with a client, sometimes when people are so traumatized and there is so much emotional dysregulation, you could just try looking into dialectical behavioral therapy or just practicing some of the calming techniques that we've talked about. Maybe the illusion of time, maybe slowing everything down a little bit and helping the person that you're just entrusted into your care to reorientate themselves back to a safe space with you, working on the rapport, building on the relationship therapeutically. Sometimes just putting that little bit of distance, because if you're a very conscientious person, and you sound to me that you are, and you really want to help, sometimes it can be felt by the person who's not able to really regulate their emotions and don't
Yeah.
really understand what is really happening. And you may not understand either what is happening right now at the moment because it's not fitting a criteria, and because we have to step outside
Yeah.
of not being so. It's difficult because symptoms can be very bureaucratic when we look and tick boxes. Sometimes it's just opening that
Yeah.
pathway up and
It's
just.
mixed sometime. Yeah.
Does that make sense? I feel you're a clinical
Yeah.
psychologist. I feel
Thank
like
you. I understand. Thank you so
do
much.
you? I
Yeah,
hope
I
you
got
do.
it. Actually, I'm too sensitive, so probably I am doubting my own self sometimes that, oh, I think I'm not doing it well. Probably I need some more study for that. Like, for example, the client is dealing with insomnia and she's having like I would say, very different kind of feelings. And she's saying that I feel like I am uh, going into the bed and I am sinking in the bed and then I feel that I'm moving around in the room. So sometimes things are difficult for us to understand that what the client is articulating, what actually she means.
Yes, of course. But you're doing such a remarkable job. You're incredible in what you're doing. May I
Thank you
ask
so
how
much.
long you have been doing this for? How long have you been doing this for?
Almost 3 years. I'm
Oh.
for 3 years. Yeah, just
Well,
fresh.
then you are remarkable, and you are going to learn. Everything is takes time.
Yeah,
You will find the more experience you have, you will find that eventually all of this will make sense. When
yeah.
you have a person that has a fragmented sense of self, like with the insomnia example,
Hmm.
um, then it's very difficult sometimes to relate to what that must feel like. But you can ask. You can
Hmm.
ask. With looking
Yeah.
at the trauma-informed questioning techniques that we did, you can always ask, and in a way that will open up that dialogue and open up the narrative by building trust. You
Hmm.
stepping aside from all the power imbalances and just entering into that place of where we meet each other as sentient beings. I also, I see myself sometimes as a sacred activist, really, because it is so
Hmm.
sacred in what we do with
Yeah.
individuals. But you're amazing, by the way. You're
Thank
doing a
you.
great
You too.
job. Don't ever, ever think you're not. You really are.
Thank
And
you so much. Thank you. Thank you for
you.
motivation.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Have an amazing day.
Yeah.
Yeah, Miss Petrina, there are a lot of questions that await you from the chat box, and I'll ask them one by one so you can respond to them accordingly. Okay,
Yes.
so Miss Florence is really eager to know that can stress or trauma be avoided?
Wow, that's a very, very, very good question. Just let me write that down, or otherwise, Miss Florence. Okay. Right. Well, no, I don't think it probably can.
Yeah,
But um, but that in itself tells us something, doesn't it? Because if we're actively trying to stay away from thoughts, feelings, people, places, or situations, sometimes no, I think it's a natural evolution of our life. I mean, I think stress can't be avoided. It's when it's a defining symptom of something like post-traumatic stress, and it's avoidance in that sense. But no, I don't think we can avoid it. We can always work with how we react to it. And it's our reactions that predetermine, our ability to be able to handle stress. But sometimes we can't, and that is also okay, I think emotional avoidance or behavioral avoidance, I think sometimes can exacerbate so many things. So I just think having an entrusted friend, a safe space, doing something that you can feel makes you feel good about yourself. But no, I don't think we can avoid stress or trauma, unfortunately.
definitely yes. Unfortunately, we cannot avoid that. Yes. Miss Amna wants to ask that sometimes stress increases even when we don't want to be stressed out. And she asked, what can we do in that situation?
So stress increases when we don't want to be stressed out.
Yes.
Okay, well, that maybe don't want to be stressed out. In what sense? Is there a little bit of context around that? Just when we say stressed out. Um, Well, if we resist stress, I guess if stress can increase when we resist or we're anxious about feeling stressed, so creating a feedback loop. There's a feedback loop that can happen very often when our reaction to stress exacerbates the stress itself. So this happens because there's probably some feelings of pressure or threat, maybe, or triggers that the stress response, something that's overlying this. I mean, I wouldn't know, but there must be an initial stressor, a challenging or some new situation or something that has created. As we talked about the fight or flight, your
I
body
believe
releases
the stressor
stress
is
hormones.
making her overwhelmed. I believe the stressor is making her overwhelmed. That's why the stress is increasing while she thinks that it shouldn't. So,
Well, you could be going into fight or flight where your body's releasing stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. So, yeah, when you don't want to be stressed, your mind and body focus on not feeling stressed. I would really look at something that could alleviate stress, some form of practice. Breathing techniques are excellent, mindfulness, which and the pressure, maybe the pressure, the focus is not on feeling stressed and how it become a source of pressure and anxiety, but intensifying that initial feeling of feeling overwhelmed. I would have to know more. I would never want to give any advice without knowing what the situation is, in case it's not a safe situation, in case it's a situation that maybe, I wouldn't know how to advise. But just because you're feeling under sustained stress, um, it could be maybe for various reasons that I don't know, feeling out of control. Maybe your reaction to the stress fuels further stress from your worrying about being stressed can also make you stressed. But what I would suggest doing, so leaving something with empowering. I would look at manage the stressor, whatever it is. So address the source of the stress when possible, as by saying no to extra responsibilities. Practice relaxation techniques if they help, breathing, yoga, something that calms the nervous system. Seek support, please seek support. Either talk to friends, family, or a professional to get a perspective and coping skills, interventions, coping skills. And please, 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 please focus on self-care. Ensure you're eating well, getting enough sleep, and incorporating exercise into your routine. And I really, wish you all the very best. I really do.
Yeah, so Miss Salma wants to ask you about workplace burnout, that it makes her feel tired and stressed, and to counter that, she works out and tries to being responsible as well. But then again, she wants to ask that what strategies can she keep, that she can use to keep herself calm during aggression at workplace. She wants some tips and tricks to keep her motivated.
With aggression at the workplace.
Yes. She feels burnt out as well. And I think that's causing that aggression at the workplace.
Well, to deal with workplace aggression, you have to prioritize your safety first of all by maintaining distance, staying calm, and using, as I'm sure you're doing, non-threatening body language. But to de-escalate the situation through active listening, I think you have to get some help from another person. I think it's I would speak if this was me, I would speak in a calm and an assertive and firm tone if the other person is offending you and you're not able to cope and manage with the aggression. But I would set some boundaries, calmly explain the limits of what you can do while the person is behaving aggressively. And I would also, if the situation doesn't de-escalate, explain you're going to get assistance. I don't know if you have an HR or somebody that you can go to. But I think it's what you can do as an individual is take the time to calm yourself down, perhaps by talking to a friend, going for a walk, for some of the methods and things that we talked about today. You can report the incident, you can take control and a sense of empowerment in the sense where you can inform your manager, your HR, or a designated person about the incident. Following the company's reporting procedures, the company must have some reporting procedures. You can review the company's policies, familiarize yourself with your company's workplace violence prevention policies and their responsibilities, and seek support. Talk to your employer and manage. And I think you can manage the incident and prevent it from reoccurring. That's you shouldn't have to deal with the situation and cope with the situation alone. There must be some way that there are people that can help. And if you struggle to communicate that by not being able to put down the boundaries and being able to assert yourself, then that's okay too. There's no right or wrong here. There's no condemnation of any sorts. Then I would really ask you to, get some help because you have rights and you have a right to live to work in an environment free from any form of violence and aggression. And once you've witnessed the risk of violence in your workplace, and where you can't remove it, you must put the rights and controls in place to protect your lovely self. So yes, definitely. I hope that helps. I don't feel like it helps because well, that's yeah. I hope that helps.
No, we really hope that helps her. Ms. Farhanaz is asking that how can trauma-informed approaches be adapted when working with survivors from diverse cultural backgrounds to ensure inclusivity and effectiveness?
So could you say that again so I can just write trauma informed when working with survivors?
From diverse cultural backgrounds
Mhm.
to ensure inclusivity and effectiveness?
That's a great question.
Mhm.
To inclusion, yeah. Right. Gosh, I have to think that. Okay. So to apply trauma-informed practices effectively with diverse cultural backgrounds, well, we have to acknowledge that trauma is influenced by personal, social, and political contexts, and that cultural norms shape its expression and its response. That's one thing. And cultivate, I would always say, as I talked about, cultural humility. So we recognize, so I'm trying to, so I recognize the systemic discrimination and build trust by ensuring safety and respecting individual and cultural narratives. This requires, all yeah, to be culturally sensitive, communication, and just, I don't know, I would try to understand the cultural context of trauma. So if this was me, I would take a cultural perspective. So I'd recognize that trauma is understood and expressed differently across cultures, and some view it medically, others view it spiritually, and some view it, like it's fate. But there's an intersection of trauma and culture. So understanding that cultural stigma, discrimination, or any types of persecution can act as barriers to seeking support for trauma, particularly for marginalized groups. And again, it comes back to what we're talking about. We apply our trauma-informed principles, but with cultural sensitivity. We have safety and trust. No type cultural humility. We develop cultural humility and awareness to understand the diverse backgrounds and lived experiences of the people that have been traumatized, and adapting the approach to be culturally sensitive and to be responsive. And that's what I would do. I would open up that dialogue and I would learn. I would work with the person and learn as much as I can, working with them back, and just asking, is that, just get to know the person. It's all about this respectful, upholding the rights and the dignity of the person. If you don't know, it's actually okay to say, I don't know. I very often say, I don't know how to help you with that, but I would like to. Please, could you, how can I help? How would you like me to help? How can I assist you? And, that's very empowering very often, because that creates a two-way. I hope that kind of helps. But I think, yeah, oh, just, yeah, I think the intersectional approach that I wrote down here is we did intersectional approach is how we understand how these multiple aspects of identity, race, gender, class, and religion intersect, and how they create these new unique experiences of trauma and disadvantage. So it's quite a lot there. It's quite mumbled, but that's just, I hope that helps. I feel confused myself now. I hope that helped.
I'm
We could
sure
do
that, yeah.
webinar just on that. It's a great, great question. It's a great question. And any
Yeah.
feedback, I'd love to know what your stance is on it.
Yes. Ms. Tanko, would you like to go ahead and ask your question? I hope I'm pronouncing the name right.
Yeah, that's fine. Greetings to everyone, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I want to say a big thank you to Miss Patrina in a very special way for walking us through the great content that she did. In my country, Cameroon, we are currently very intentional about trauma care. But one of the things we've realized is that in the current dispensation, we are facing multiple challenges. Challenges relating to capacity, challenges relating to resources available, challenges relating to um, required output vis-a-vis the inputs that we have. So one of the things which I really appreciate this session for is that it's already kind of like taking care of one of the challenges that we are facing, that of capacity. such sessions are capacity building sessions, and they are very good and very vital. But then I just wanted to find out if it's possible that she shares with us other best practices that have worked in such constrained settings in an effort to provide trauma-informed care so
So
that we
best,
can be
best,
able to adopt.
best, sorry, I beg your pardon, and I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Best practices, because the line is not very clear.
To
Challenges.
promote service delivery, to promote trauma-informed care service delivery in resource-constrained settings.
So practices to promote trauma-informed care in what setting, sorry?
In resource-limited settings.
I could not hear that. I'm very sorry. You'll have to.
Settings.
Am I clear now? I think I dropped the
I think it's the
my question.
internet. I think it's my internet, actually. I don't think it's you at all. I think it's me. I couldn't hear the moderator, Jeanette. Sorry, I beg your pardon. So practice to promote trauma-informed practices.
In resource
In
limited
resource-constrained settings.
In resource settings.
Resources, in settings where resources are limited.
Or where resources are limited.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
a very good question. Okay, so let me just have a look at what I've written down. So, okay, so when you say resources are limited, you mean organizational barriers like insufficient funds? Is that what we're talking about? Leadership gaps, maybe cultural resistance to change? What would I say?
All of it.
That's such a good question.
We
I
have
can.
settings where leadership, the responsibility of leadership does not actually play their role as leaders should normally. They don't create an enhancing environment for service delivery relating to trauma-informed care. The staff capacities are not built as required. So it's a mesh of complex challenges. And how can we maneuver these challenges yet still providing quality services in the line of trauma-informed care?
Truthfully, easily. It doesn't matter what the surroundings are or what you're going through, and I mean, if you have resource limitations or leadership, some policies, insufficient leadership engagement, a lack of clear policies, or insufficient time allocated to trauma-informed care can hinder its adoption. But the implementation is I would look at, do you have like standardized frameworks and guidelines for, you have the little bit from here today for trauma-informed care, and I would implement those. I would look at training. Maybe there's a lack of clarity of what constitutes effective trauma training. Maybe a lack of feedback, a failure to gather feedback from service users, or a lack of systemic review of initiative outcomes can impede progress. But you can apply trauma-informed care in any setting, in any professional setting, in your homes. It's something that we do. It's just something that we need to become aware of. It's actually not, and I mean, the biggest, I think, is probably, I would worry more about burnout. From what I can hear, from what you're telling me, is that the risk of secondary traumatic stress, and that could lead to burnout, which it affects the ability to adopt and sustain a trauma-informed approach. But I think if you adhere to some of the simple techniques that are used in this introductory webinar, which I'm sure you are, I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job, but I don't know, I just think barriers and barriers and enablers for the implementation of trauma-informed care. I think it can be re-traumatizing for trauma survivors where their memories of the past, and just, I don't know. It's such a good question. I would like to give that some thought, actually. If you want to DM me with my LinkedIn, if you write that to me, I will put some thought into that. Because I know there are factors that promote or impede the implementation of trauma-informed care, and they're not yet well characterized and they're not yet well understood. So I would have thought that was an excellent question. I'd be happy if you wrote that to me. I will look into that for you and write back to you. I would be doing you a huge disservice if I tried to answer that right now, but I will answer it for you if you'd like me to. With your help, we can collaborate together and go, we can share. How does that sound? I'm sorry. I hope that helps. It hasn't really helped, has it?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. I'm going to reach out to you on LinkedIn so that we can pick up
Please
from there.
do. I will always reply, and I'd be so happy to have this conversation with you and we can work together on it. No problem at all.
Okay, so we have next question that how can one recognize signs of re-traumatization and then respond appropriately?
So signs of re-traumatization in the person or the survivor and victim that they're trying to help.
That has not been specified. I believe so
Okay.
in the individual who has suffered trauma before.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay, that's okay, fine. Well, signs of re-traumatization for survivors of gender-based violence would include re-experiencing the trauma through flashbacks or nightmares, through avoidance behaviors like social withdrawal that we talked about in that window of tolerance, and physiological arousal such as hypervigilance, which we talked about again, or difficulty in sleep. And survivors may also experience so the question is secondary re-traumatized. So you would just see mood disturbances, anxiety, depression, changes in your ability to concentrate. So it's just a reliving again of past memories. Secondary re-traumatization, and there could be a whole. You could have physical symptoms such as chronic pain. You could even have gastrointestinal issues, negative thought patterns, difficulty feeling positive emotions, and increased in irritability are all very common. You can have emotional numbness or dysregulation. I know when I've been traumatized again is because I can get quite socially withdrawn, or my mood can become quite low. And I've really wanted today to talk to you about something about, we haven't got time, but I'd love to speak to you about it, is about something when the body does it. So the body keeps the score. So it's when we hold memories of past trauma somatically within our bodies, but we cannot remember the memory. And that's a very interesting concept. And it's one, so the memory is relived, but it's relived somatically. So it's lived through the mood, it's lived through all the things that I've been talking about with no memory or no recollection. It's very different. It's a type of memory that's related to episodic memory. So where we choose to remember, we go back into the past and we remember. But when this happens, very often we don't remember. We're not choosing to go back. We're reliving it somatically. We're living it physiologically. We're living it by how we feel, and that requires, for me, well, I'm very religious, so everything I do is, I go to God. So my number one thing in my world is I serve God. And then if prayer, all those things didn't work, then I would see my therapist. So it's self-care all the time. For me, self-care is my faith. But journaling, just seek the help and the support and identify the triggers, what they are, and try and identify what it was that was said that re-triggered and it made you feel traumatized and experiencing symptoms of trauma. Does that
Yeah,
help?
I'm sure it helps. I am sure. There is another question from Miss Faranaz, and she's asking that as an Afghan girl facing many challenges, how can I find hope and strength to overcome the trauma when my community, my family may not fully understand or support mental health issues?
Mm. Wow. That's a very, very good question. My goodness, thank you very much for sharing that. Gosh, thank you for your vulnerability. Well, I would, I think that's just about, I think it's about, I would rather take that question up probably privately, if that's okay, because I just wouldn't, I just could not, I would be doing such a huge disservice to such a beautiful question, with sharing such a vulnerable aspect of life, that I just wouldn't feel comfortable answering that here now without knowing enough. But I would, if this young lady would like to contact me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to answer it privately, whereas I can be more helpful. Does that, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
we'll make sure to reach her out. We'll make sure to ask her out to reach you.
I'm so sorry. I just would feel I would need to know more, really. Just because from an ethical point of view, I think it would be good to know to know more, and safeguarding, and I wouldn't want to do anything that may cause harm, or it doesn't work, or I'd need to know much more, and I'm so happy to help.
Miss Petrina, there's no need to apologize because it showcases your professionalism. And
Oh,
I think that's what everybody needs. Yeah, to not be violated or being discussed in front of everyone. So I think, yeah, she should approach you
that's,
privately.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's so very, it was, but it's just, yeah, and I'd love to help.
yeah. There's another question that Miss Aisha is asking: can trauma be cured completely?
I'm going to answer this from my own lived experience. No.
Yes.
No, it can't be. No. I see myself as somebody that walks alongside my trauma. I don't define and have this objective of trying to find this happiness, or I look for peace. I look for inner peace where I have total acceptance of what's happened, and I have forgiveness for the people that perpetrated all the heinous things that happened to me. So no, I don't believe it can be, but I do believe that you can find peace and forgiveness. And I do believe that through what all these measures and all these tools that we've discussed today, I really do believe in the transformative power of being able to change. And I'm absolutely passionate about that. That isn't just something I say as a lip service. I believe that all change is possible. And to reach a sense of purpose and a sense of peace, and to live the life that you were destined to live. So, no, it's a little no, but you can live a very fulfilled and healed life. And when you learn how to manage trauma and your own trauma, you recognize it. So then you immediately attend and self-care. So you're not reactive to it. For me, I don't react to something that comes up. I will sit with it. I will allow it. I will go to church. I will pray, and then I will allow it to pass. I will try and understand what it is, and I'll journal, and it passes. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the last questions from the chat box, and that I would like you to address, is that how do you know if you are healing from a trauma?
Because about when we were speaking about that window of tolerance, if you're becoming calmer, if you're not able to regulate your emotions, if you're not so highly reactive to people that may inadvertently trigger you. If you're able to, because of the hypervigilance that comes with trauma, very often you will find yourself not being so affected by what other people think of you or what other people say. And you'll start, and when you also reclaim your sense of self and your sense of purpose. So I think that's, it's all about reclaiming your sense of self. There's a lot of literature that says, because what underlies all of this for me is these structural inequalities and gender inequalities. So we have to do everything that we can to empower women to make changes that are productive in their lives. And I think it's a holistic approach. It's not just one approach. It's a trauma-informed approach, but it's so many other multifaceted aspects that work together to create a woman that walks in this life with peace, purpose, and meaning. So I think you can tell by your emotional state.
Yeah, definitely. Miss
Oh, you
Atya,
can
yeah,
tell us about.
yeah, what would you like to add, please?
Hello, sorry, ma'am. Once again, I'm raising my hand. I'm asking about just the courses or any topics that's coming maybe in the future from your side. Am I audible to you?
I can just
Hello?
Okay.
about I can just about hear you. Sorry, am I lovely? What were you asking?
Yeah,
Courses?
yeah, the courses or like webinars and the sessions. Of course, this session was very insightful, and I really like that. So that is why I want to know more about the courses, anything that is like good for a clinical psychologist to gain more, to understand more. So that is why I'm just asking this.
Yes, I mean,
If
I can, you DM me, I can put together some reading for you and I can put together some webinars maybe, or maybe I can put together some reading for you. Um, leave that with me. I can get some things
mhm,
together for you. No
okay,
problem. If you DM me,
okay.
I will send you some info. And you're a clinical psychologist?
Yes, yes, I'm a clinical psychologist. Yes.
Okay, then I will tailor it for clinical psychology. So
Okay.
yeah, you DM me,
Thank you so.
you're so
Sure.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. We will also provide all the previous links to Miss Petrina's sessions we have had so far with her. You can go through them as well, Miss Atya. And for the last time, Miss Wahid, you can go ahead and share your thoughts. I think we'll wrap up the session after this.
Thank you very much for giving me the chance again. I would like to highlight one point for Farah Nasjan, as she's living in Afghanistan. Those who are living in Afghanistan, girls or boys, there is an organization by the name of WASA. WASA organization has great experience and expertise in MHPSS, PSS, such activities. The good thing is WASA has female staff and male staff. If there are some sisters in this session who need to have context-based sessions on PSAs, on something else, GBV, ACA, or some other things, they can go through this website and there is a contact. They sort of be connected with the counselors, PCS counselors, even legal counselors. They will console on legal issues, PCS issues. I think it would be good. In addition to the guidance Patrina
Amazing.
says,
You're
that would
amazing.
also be helpful. Just felt responsible to raise this issue. Thank you very much.
You're amazing. Could you spell that for me? I would be very interested in looking that.
Right, yeah, yeah. I'm also sharing the website in the chat box. Right,
Thank you
write
very
the full
much.
name
That
and
was
yes,
so
yeah.
helpful.
Right, yeah.
Thank
You're amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, with that, I think I'll move towards concluding remarks. And it would not be wrong to say that it was a profound and as well as a transformative journey today, this session particularly. And Miss Petrina, your courage in sharing not only your expertise, but your, lived truth has touched everybody's heart. The chat box was full of grateful messages for you because everyone felt so inspired by you with your journey, with everything that you shared with everybody. And you've shown us that healing isn't just possible, it's powerful, and that survivors, they don't just recover, they lead the way forward as well, just like you have for us.
You're
And
so
it has been incredible. Thank you so much for being the embodiment of trauma informed leadership and for showing us what genuine empowerment looks like, truly.
oh,
And, to all the participants from around the globe, thank you so much for being a part of change, being, the questions you asked, the insights you have shared, and your, committing to implementing these trauma informed principles will ripple out far beyond today's session. I really hope so that it will. So, as I close this session today, I encourage you all to start small, but start today. Choose one trauma informed principle Ms. Petrina discussed and integrate into your work this week, because somewhere, somehow, somebody's healing journey depends on your willingness to, see their strength, honor their experience, and, respond with informed compassion. So,
lovely.
thank you everyone for being part of Feminine Ascension's mission to create a world where every survivor is met with understanding, respect, and hope. And until we meet again, I would just say
Yeah.
keep advocating, keep learning, and keep ascending.
Oh, thank you
Ms.
so
Patel,
much.
something you would like to add?
Just that, Women Ascension has my heart. It really does. And I just, thank you to everybody for making me feel so welcome. And I just appreciate all of you and sending you so much blessings and love. And I'll see you soon. I'll see you soon.
Yeah,
And thank you for
really.
all the really challenging questions. I really, really look forward to them. So thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very, very humbled, honestly, really humbled.
Ms. Patrina, we were honored, and we would really love to have you again with us. Yeah.
Thank you. As always, always.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for your
much,
time.
everybody. Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
You too, ma'am. Miss Patrina, you too, please. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye bye, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much, Ma.